Okay, today's Michigan welcome is going to be given to Suneel Gupta. Paul, there you go, Paul. Thank you for that. Suneel Gupta, who serves as the entrepreneur in residence at Kleiner Perkins and as a visiting scholar at Harvard University. While Wolverines know Harvard as the Michigan of the East, some in this audience may not know Kleiner Perkins. It is considered the premier Silicon Valley venture capital firm. To offer you some context, KBCB has backed entrepreneurs in AOL, Amazon, Electronic Arts for you gamers, Google, Netscape, Sun Microsystems, and WebMD. Kleiner Perkins focuses its investments globally in 3 areas: digital, life sciences, and clean tech. So imagine being the entrepreneur in residence there. And he's going to come out on our stage in a matter of seconds. As the founder and CEO of Rise, the nutrition tracking and personal trainer app, Suneel raised funding from Google Ventures and was backed by senior leaders at Facebook, Uber, and Airbnb. Just 2 years after launch, One Medical acquired Rise for nearly $20 million. Suneel Gupta was named the new face of innovation by the New York Stock Exchange. While serving as VP of Product Development at Groupon, he helped grow the business from millions in revenue to billions in revenue, and into what Forbes Magazine named the fastest growing company of all time. Suneel has been heralded as a visionary product leader and featured by the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Vanity Fair, CNBC, and The Today Show. Though he won't always admit it, Suneel is also an attorney and is licensed to practice in California and in front of the United States Supreme Court. Are you guys pinching yourselves? Who's actually going to come out in a matter of seconds? Prior to completing law school, he served in President Clinton's West Wing. A proud U of M alum, Suneel obtained his bachelor's degree from the University of Michigan in Information Systems. I encourage everyone in this auditorium, because you're really pumped, to please give a warm welcome for this week's guest speaker, Suneel Gupta.
All right, good. Hey, thank you, Christine. Thank you so much for having me here. It's so funny for me sometimes to hear a bio like that, because it makes me sound like I'm a natural-born entrepreneur, and the reality is that I'm not. I left school. When I left college, I did the opposite of entrepreneurship. I became a management consultant. After that, I went to law school, and law school is where entrepreneurial thinking goes to die. And eventually, when I started my own companies, the first 2 that I started both failed. In fact, I was failing so bad that one day I got a phone call. This is a true story. I'm in San Francisco. I'm thinking about what my next thing might be. And I get a phone call from these conference organizers. And they say, hey, we're putting together a conference called FailCon, which stands for Failure Conference. And we would love for you to be the keynote speaker of this conference. So there I am, up on stage, talking about failure, talking about all my missteps and all the ways that I messed things up. And it turns out there's a New York Times photographer in the audience, a New York Times reporter, and she brought along a photographer, and they decide to write a story on this, calling Wearing Your Failures on Your Sleeve. And whose photo did they choose to be the cover of this article? My photo. It was me. So there I am. And what's funny about this is that not only am I I'm the failure boy, sort of the poster child for failure. But if you look at that audience, like nobody's paying attention. Nobody. There's like one person in that audience paying attention. So listen, you have a sense of what's about to come for the next 15 minutes, 15 to 20, and then we'll kind of open it up for Q&A and hang out for a little bit. This article for me was a total gift. And the reason that it was a gift was because it kind of in some ways allowed me to be a student again. There were people that reached out to me that had read this article that said, hey, let's grab coffee. I found that just by sending people a link to this article, people were more likely to meet me. And because we were actually having a conversation that was sort of grounded in failure, I had this very vulnerable side of me. And when you're vulnerable with other people, they get vulnerable with you. And so what happens is you start to learn more stories. You know, I got to learn more about entrepreneurship and things that I think changed my mind, changed my thinking about how entrepreneurship really works. Because I think before this experience, what I really imagined entrepreneurship looked like was this. You know, one person, sort of with a vision, who creates something like Apple. But the more that I dug into stories of big companies, I realized they didn't start like this. They started like this. And you look at big ideas, they didn't start like this. They started like this. And you look at big movements, they don't start like this. They start like this. There are always people in the room that are supporting the person at the front. In this case, MLK came up with the idea, but without these people, what he created wouldn't have happened. Same with companies, same with movements. You can pull back the layers on any story that you respect, any company that you respect. The people in the headlines may not be the other people in this room, but if you really peel back the story, you'll find that it wouldn't have happened had there not been these people in the room taking a chance. And I like to call these people the backers. These are the people who take a chance on you. And again, no company can succeed without backers. People who don't know, candidly, if your thing is going to work. They don't know if what you are doing is going to happen, is going to work. But they believe enough in you that they're willing to take a chance on you. And so if you look at sort of people who are, we would consider to be the prototypical backable people today, people who have people taking bets on them all the time. These people have no problems raising money. They have no problems recruiting good people to come join their cause. But what if you were to rewind the tape a little bit? And what if you were to look at where they were before? Who took a bet on them then? Right? Before they were known, before they had a track record, who were their backers? And why did those people decide to take a bet on them? I mentioned that article from the New York Times sort of made me a student of entrepreneurship again. And this is the question that I find to be most fascinating. What is it that backers see in people? What is it that makes people want to take a bet on you? That's the question I've been trying to answer. And in order to answer it, I've been spending time with lots of different people. I know you're reading a book right now by this guy, Reid Hoffman, who wrote The Startup Review. And when I talk to people like this, and being based in San Francisco, I have a lot of access to these folks, and again, I send them my failure article, and they say, all right, I'll sit down with you, I'll talk to you. And when I talk to them again, I try to rewind the tape, right? I say, who backed that guy, right? What did people see in you at that time? And why did you write a check to this guy? What did you see in that guy? And what did you see in the founders of Airbnb? Why did you write the first check to them? And after learning more and more of these stories and spending time with more and more people who have backed others and that have been backed, what I realize is a couple of things. And the most important thing, which is what I want to convince you of today and talk to you more about, is that it's actually not about pedigree, it's not about experience, and it's actually not about natural ability. In fact, most of the people who I found to be backable learned to be backable along the way, which means that all of us in this room, including me, can learn to be backable, which is exactly how I've spent the past few years, figuring out what are the things I can learn to try to get people more convinced to take a bet on me. And it's the only reason I've been able to get companies off the ground. It's the only reason that my companies have been able to get traction. It's the only reason that any of that stuff in that bio might be half true, is because I've learned more about how to become backable. And so today, with the time remaining, I want to share a few of those things with you. Three things, three habits. So habit number one, which was right there, is that they actually don't start with a big vision, but they actually start with a narrow vision. And so take a look at Jeff Bezos, right? Take a look at sort of what you'll hear today if you hear him speak. You'll hear him start with a very grand vision. We want to actually be Earth's most customer-centric company. But again, if you rewind the tape to when he was first starting out, to even years after Amazon went public, you would have heard something like this, right? We want to transform book buying, right? We want to make that experience simple. The point is that he was very, very specifically focused on the book buying experience. He didn't want to be Earth's most customer-centric company. He wanted to focus on books. And this was an important lesson for me, and I think for founders that I work with, because sometimes we look at this and we say, hey, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, I need to have a vision that feels like this. And I can't tell you how many times I sit at Kleiner Perkins and meet with founders who come in with pitch decks, and it's like the word revolutionize is used all the time. Like, we want to revolutionize the way the world lives, right? It's like, go more narrow, All right, pick something specific. And if you look again at most of the founders, most of the movements, most of the companies that have been successful, they actually did start narrow. They didn't start broad. Here's another example. You guys might have read last month, Mark Zuckerberg wrote this manifesto, right? And in the manifesto, he described the Facebook vision to connect the world, all right? Well, all right, let's rewind the tape a little bit to when Mark Zuckerberg was first starting out. Somebody went over to that little house they had in Palo Alto and they interviewed him, right? And one of the questions that they asked is, hey, look, you're so focused on universities right now. That's the focus of Facebook. What's next? After you conquer universities, after you have a few more universities on board, what's the next step for Facebook? Listen to his answer.
And where are you taking Facebook at this point? You're going to expand to those other schools that you're not at. Mm-hmm. And then what?
I mean, there doesn't necessarily have to be more. You know, I mean, like a lot of people are focused on like taking over the world or doing like the biggest thing, getting the most users. And I mean, I think like part of making a difference and doing something cool is focusing intensely. There's a level of service that we could provide when we were just at Harvard that we can't provide for all of the colleges. And there's a level of service that we can provide when we're a college network that we wouldn't be able to provide if we went to other types of things. So, I mean, like I really just want to see everyone focus on college and
Right, so literally his answer to, hey, what are you going to do beyond college is, well, there doesn't have to be more than that. We want to focus on colleges. And again, the reason I bring this up is because I think we sometimes forget that as starting out entrepreneurs. We feel like we need to make our vision as big as possible. But again, if you look at most of the successful entrepreneurs out there, they made their vision as specific as possible. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they weren't thinking beyond that. What I find through these conversations is that entrepreneurs tend to have two narratives in their head. The narrative that they're going to share with the world and the narrative that they have inside their head that they're going to keep to themselves. Now, the narrative that they share with the world has to be specific. It really does. And the reason for that is because backers, yeah, sure, they want to be inspired, but they need to believe. I mean, imagine if Martin Luther King went to his early backers and said, hey, we're going to have 1 million people march. 1 million. Chances are that a lot of people in that room would have felt like he was crazy, and that was not doable. But by starting out by saying, look, hey, we're going to start with this first boycott, right here, this boycott of the bus system. We can do that. That vision is backable. That vision is believable. So remember, yes, absolutely, inspiration is everything, and backers want to be inspired. It helps. But they can't just be inspired. They need to believe. And so when you think about your two narratives, think about it like this. Right? Everything around that you have in your head right now represents this entire screen. Right? But there's a part of that screen, right? There's a part of this vision that is actually very clear to you. Whereas the rest of it might be beautiful, but it's unclear. Save that part, and instead share what's in that lens. Make it specific. Draw the edges around it. I'm focused on books. I'm focused on universities. I'm focused on this type of person. Right? Make it believable. It doesn't mean, again, that you can't have something broader than that. And if people ask, you can say, look, well, by doing this right, this is going to give us the ability to expand. But right now, I'm focused on books. I'm focused on universities. Focused on black cars. Focused on the couch surfing market. Whatever it is, right? Have that narrow lens. Let's go to habit number 2. They self-optimize. So what do I mean by this? Well, everybody in this class has heard or seen this type of loop many, many times, right? This idea of how do you actually create and build a product, put the product out there, collect the data, put that data back into your product, and do that over and over and over again. Lean startup of you, they all talk about this principle. Right, it's how companies like Netflix are made and how they go from one side to the other, starting out with DVDs to eventually going into streaming, to eventually going into original content. But what I found is that people do this as well. You have people who are able to use a feedback loop like this to actually self-optimize, to actually make themselves better. And the most backable people are always improving. So a couple of tips for you. Number one is that if you are actually going out there and raising money from venture capitalists, take a couple of exhibition rounds. And what I mean by that is actually pitch people who who are friendly to you, but also pitch people who you don't really want to raise money from. It doesn't really matter to you. So, for example, if Google Ventures or Kleiner Perkins is the firm that you really want to raise money from, don't make them your first pitch. I can always tell when founders come in and pitch us when this is their first pitch versus after they've had a few warm-up rounds. Take a couple of exhibition rounds and pitch people. Because the mentality that I think you want is that you actually want to improve yourself all the time. You want to keep making it better. What's amazing to me is even when I see Reid Hoffman pitch things like LinkedIn, his pitch is constantly changing. It's actually improving all the time. What I found from very backable, very successful entrepreneurs is that they don't tend to sort of improve themselves in big bangs, the way we kind of think about how improvement is made. They don't all of a sudden wake up one day and they have this eureka moment. Instead, what tends to happen is that they are tweaking and improving 1% every day. Now, 1% might sound like a small number, right? 1%, would do nothing for you tomorrow, maybe, right? Maybe not noticeable. But, for those of you in this room who, look at statistics and math, what happens when you improve by 1% every day after 72 days? 72 days. You double it, right? You double your skill. And within a year, you 15 times your skill. It really does compound. By making a vow to improve your pitch in the way that you describe yourself and the way you describe your vision in your company every day, you will continuously make it better. And again, we underestimate what we can do in a year. You can dramatically improve things. We underestimate what we can do in a month. You can dramatically improve things, so long as you're continuously improving and continuously innovating. One of my favorite sort of stories about this has nothing to do with technology, but I used to work as a speechwriter, and in 2004, I was backstage at the Democratic National Convention, and I was helping out basically all of the people who were about to get up on stage, and it was like, the motley crew of Democrats. It was Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Al Gore, it was Joseph Lieberman at that time, and there was this guy who was sort of sitting by himself, almost like scribbling and writing in a notepad, but pretty calm, just kind of hanging out. And I had no idea who it was. And so I asked the organizer, who is that guy? And the organizer says he's a state senator from Illinois. He's given the keynote tonight. His name's Barack Obama. And so I walk over to him and I say, hey, how's it going? And it's funny because, his mannerisms, his look has changed quite a bit. He's got a lot more gray hair now, but his mannerisms are exactly the same as they were in 2004. He looks at me and I say, how's it going now? How do you feel about the speech tonight? And he's like, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. And I was like, cool, man. That's great. That's great. And obviously, he was pretty good. He nailed it. He gave a great speech. And a lot of people know how that story unfolded, but what a lot of people don't know is maybe how that story began. 4 years before that, in 2000, Barack Obama wasn't just not invited to speak at the Democratic National Convention, he wasn't even invited to the Democratic National Convention. He literally could not get a floor pass to see the convention. He had to watch it outside the convention over the Jumbotron. Couldn't get in. It's pretty amazing, right? But what a lot of people say happened to him after that was that he decided that he had sort of plateaued a little bit as a speaker, as a politician, and he vowed to himself to start really tweaking the way that he worked, really tweaking the way that he presented to audiences. He would start to collect more feedback. He would start to go through the loop that we talked about, right? You can innovate not just on your products, you can innovate on yourself. And the most backable people tend to do exactly that. So let me give you just a couple of tips on this. Number one is that I see founders oftentimes go out and try to collect feedback, but the problem is that they raise the stakes on people giving them that feedback. So let me give you an example. I did this as well a lot, which is when I was starting my companies, I would go to my friends and I would say, hey, I'm really excited about this idea. I really want to go do this. What do you think? Right? And none of my good friends, at least, were going to want to say, I hate it. It sucks. Right? And the reason for that was because I had already told them that I was super excited about it. Right? And what I found was that when I would go to a friend instead and say, hey, I'm kind of thinking about this. Not sure, but I want to get your take on it. If you lower the stakes, people are much more likely to give you honest feedback. So I'll give you another example. When I was starting my company, Rise, I was trying to find, basically it was an app that helped you eat better and lose weight, right? And so I literally stood outside of Weight Watchers meetings. And as people would walk in, I would get in their way and be like, hey, hand them a flyer and try to download the app on their phone. And so I literally stood in the streets of San Francisco going to different Weight Watchers locations every evening to try to get people signed up for my service. And what was funny was that people would often give me feedback. And if I told them that I was the CEO of the company, like, hey, I'm the founder, CEO of the company, what do you think about this? People were totally, they pulled punches. They weren't very honest. So I sort of corrected my approach, and eventually I started going up to people saying, hey, I'm working for this company part-time. I'm a TaskRabbit guy, and I got hired to come do this and show you this app. What do you think? So I would never tell them that I was a CEO. In fact, in some cases, I wouldn't tell them that I was even affiliated with the company, right? And the amount of feedback that I got, the honesty I got from doing that, the insights that I got from doing that were the things that really helped me. So again, lowering the stakes, but also, get honest people around you, right? Surround yourself with honest people. So let me show you one thing here. Of course, my wife is terrified that I'm about to show you guys clips from 8 Mile. And she's like, this is, you're embarrassing yourself. But I'm already embarrassed. So for those of you who haven't seen this movie, 8 Mile, what you're about to see here is a scene. It's at the very end of the movie, and at the end of the movie, Eminem has to go through 3 battles, right? 3 rap battles. And he's gone through the first 2, and he's won both of them, right? And he's right about to go up to the 3rd battle, and this is the big one. He's going up against his arch nemesis, this guy named Papa Doc, right? And he's feeling pretty good about it. And what you're about to see in this scene is he's just finished the 2nd battle. He just won it. And all of his friends are cheering him on. They're all pumping him up, except for one friend. So check this out.
Got it, man. You're a fucking genius, man. Yo, just make sure you serve this clown in the next round for me, please. Yeah, whoop Papa Doc's ass.
Yeah, he ain't got no vocabulary. Are you worried about what he's gonna say?
What do you mean?
You know, about Wink and that Alex bitch getting it on and then beating you up and giving you a black eye and shit.
Stupid. Cheddar? Fuck all that. Listen to you, man. You're making history tonight, man.
It ain't not. You got it. Oh, yeah.
You got this.
All right, so Cheddar is the one who says, hey, are you what are you worried about this? Are you worried about that, right? All of his other friends are saying, hey, you're all good, right? And what Cheddar says to him is, hey, look, but are you worried about that hole, right? Are you worried about this hole, right? And guys, what I can tell you is that those are annoying conversations, but they're also the most valuable conversations. There are people who will, there are friends of yours, people who are close to you, who will feel like they just put a knife in your gut when they tell you that they don't like your idea because of this or because of that. But as long as they're being constructive, as long as you know they're coming from a good place, these are the most valuable friends to have. These are the people who actually make entrepreneurs who they are, right? So in this case, Cheddar says, hey, but are you worried about this and are you worried about that? And literally in the 5 minutes in between this scene and the scene I'm about to show you, Eminem gets ready for that. He says, all right, instead of him bringing it up for me, I'm going to bring it up first, right? I'm the one that's actually going to address those holes before Papa Doc even has a chance. Take a walk.
Now everybody from the 313, put your motherfucking hands up and follow me. Everybody from the 313, put your motherfucking hands up. Look. Now while he stands tough, notice that this man did not have his hands up. This free world's got you gassed up. Now who's afraid of the big bad wolf? 1, 2, 3, and to the 4. 1 pop, 2 pop, 3 pop, 4. 4 pop, 3 pop, 2 pop, 1. Your pop, he's pop, no pop, none. This guy ain't no motherfucking MC. I know everything he's about to say against me. I am white, I am a fucking bum. I do live in a trailer with my mom.
So, yeah, right? The funny thing is, it's better for me to just play that clip for you than to try to describe it. You know, it would be like when, so then he told Papa Doc that. So there it is, right? But he basically took everything that this other guy was going to say, said it first. He addressed the holes, right? Again, I think it's one of the most important things that an entrepreneur can learn is how to surround himself or herself with the right people who are willing to give them this honest feedback. So let me get to habit number 3, and then we're going to wrap it all up, right? Which is this: they learn how to manage their own psychology. Now, let me be honest with you. If I were sitting where you were right now, and somebody came in and put a slide like this up on the wall, I would probably roll my eyes, right? This is an entrepreneurship class, right? Ben Horowitz wrote a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. How many people here read that? Okay, for those of you who haven't, I actually highly recommend it. It's a very good book. And one of the things he writes in this book is that the most important and underrated tool or skill set that an entrepreneur can have is learning how to manage their own psychology. And to be honest with you, that was a really hard concept for me to grasp. And when I was starting out as an entrepreneur, I would see graphs like this, Airbnb, right? And I'd be like, this is the company that I want to go build, right? And these guys aren't having a tough time getting backers. They're not having a tough time getting money or people to join their company. And that is true, but what about here, right? What about in that first year of the company when they had 0 traction, right? When they had very few backers, very few people in the room. This is the time where sort of managing your own psychology is very important. And yet, the overwhelming majority of startups start with something like this. The reason that I bring that up is because I'd gone through this, and I went and talked to a friend, a mentor, a guy named Brad Feld, who started Techstars, and I said, hey, how do you do it? What can I do here? Because I'm kind of freaking out, and I don't know if my company's going to work. And he said to me that one of the most important things that an entrepreneur can learn to do is learn how to dance with their doubt, right? How do you actually not try to fight your doubt, but how do you dance with your doubt? And I want to spend the rest of this time really telling you sort of what I've taken from that, because if I could only leave you with one thing, if I had to come up here on stage and skip the M&M stuff and give you one thing, it would be this. Learning how to dance with your doubt is so important, and it's so important for me because what it meant for me was actually learning a technique called the play it out technique. And what that means is that, we all have doubts. Right now, there's probably something coming up in your life that you're kind of doubting. You're not sure if you're going to do well in. It could be a test. It could be a presentation. It could be a date. Whatever it is, right? Something that you are fearing. The way that the human mind works is that you kind of have a debate going on inside your head whenever you have a doubt. There'll be one voice that will say, hey, you know what? You're probably going to blow it. And then there's another voice that says, you know what? I'm not going to blow it. And here's why. And they kind of go back and forth at each other. Brad's advice to me was, hey, instead of trying to debate it, why not actually accept it and actually start to pull it out, play it out, right? And say to that voice, okay, let's say that I do blow it. Then what happens, right? Okay, let's say that happens. Then what happens? And instead of trying to push, you pull. Right? You pull it out. So let me give you an example. I was at Rise. Again, I already described the business. We had an app, and we were part of the App Store, the iTunes App Store. And Apple sent me an email one day and said, hey, look, because you're selling a digital service, we need to start charging you 30%. Right? We need to take a 30% cut of your business. Now for me, 30% would have completely crushed my business. I didn't have enough margin to be able to give Apple an additional 30% and still make my unit economics and my business work. It would have ended me, or ended the business. And I said to them, hey, look, I don't think this is a digital service. We have real human beings who are actually sort of interacting with people on the app. So I actually think it's a human-based service, more like an Uber or an Airbnb, not a digital service like a magazine. And after some back and forth, they finally said, all right, why don't you come in and talk to us? And there are going to be some people in the room. We want to give you a heads up. One of the people in the room might be Tim Cook, right? Because we're all trying to figure this out ourselves, and we want to hear your point of view. It's almost in some ways like the Supreme Court saying, hey, we'll hear this one case, and based on where we fall in this case, all these other cases will be decided. And for whatever reason, it was my case that got picked. So I'm on the road, literally driving from San Francisco to Cupertino, to Apple's headquarters, and I'm freaking out. I'm freaking out, right? And so I pull into the Cupertino parking lot, and I sit there in my car, and I do what Brad Feld taught me to do. Instead of trying to debate the voice in my head, I decide to play it out. So the voice in my head says to me, you're totally going to bomb, right? Like, you're totally going to screw this up. In the play it out technique, what I do is I take a piece of paper out and I draw a line down the center of that piece of paper. And I say to that voice, I say, all right, well, let's say that I screw it up. Then what? It says, well, your unit economics will no longer work, right? And on the right side of the column, I assign what that thing is, a probability on 1 to 10. So I say, all right, let's give that a 7. My unit economics will no longer work. But if that's true, then what happens? And the voice says, well, the business is going to fail. And I say, all right, let's give that a probability. Let's give that a 6. But if the business fails, then what happens? What happens next? And it says, well, everybody's going to know that you're a terrible, terrible CEO, right? And I say to the voice, all right, okay, I accept that. Let's give that a probability. Let's give that a 5. I think it's a 5 out of 10. And if that happens, then what happens? And the voice says, all right, well, you're going to grow bitter and no one's going to like you. I say, all right, well, okay, let's give that a 4, right? And what happens as a result of that? Your wife will leave you and you will die alone, right? And I give that a 2, right? At least not over this, right? And my insight to you, as weird as this slide was, I'm sure, is that the human mind has this very uncanny and powerful ability to lump all of those things on the left column, lump them all together. And so what that means is you're going to walk into a room one day and you're going to be nervous, and the problem that you're really trying to solve is actually the problem up on the top left, right? You want your unit economics to work. But the fear that you have inside of you, the feeling, you're going to be like, why do I feel this way? And the reason that you do is because your mind has played a trick. It's made you believe that when you walked into the room, what was really on stake was at the bottom. Your wife is going to leave you, your husband's going to leave you, you're going to die alone, all right? At least that's the way my mind works. And I'm pretty sure now, after spending time with lots and lots of founders, that I'm not alone. A lot of people's minds work this way. And my point to you is this: when you look at founders that you respect, we oftentimes have this belief that they are fearless, that they are fearless people. But the reality is that they're not. They're actually not fearless. They feel a lot of fear. But the founders that I really admire, the ones that have been through it enough, have learned how to dance with their fear. They've learned how to dance with their doubt. You don't have to do this. Feel free to use this if you want. But figure out for you what it is before you walk into a room that makes you sort of dance with that doubt, dance with that fear, rather than trying to just push it out. What gets you both on the same page? It might be the most important thing you can do for yourself in order for you to be backable. So these were my original backers. They were literally the people I went to school with, I went to college with. They were the people when my business failed and everybody was laughing at me and my parents were telling me to go get a job. These are the people who let me sleep on their couch. I've literally talked to all 3 of them over the past week. I talk to them every week. They're the people that I will always consider my original backers. And I think there's a very high likelihood for all of you that you will meet your original backers right here on campus. And so for that reason, I want to try an experiment, which is, I think everybody here has an index card, right? Does anybody not have an index card? We're going to try an experiment here, which is that for the next minute on that card, I want you to write this out, but fill in the blanks. I need help with blank so that I can blank. So let me give you a couple of examples. I need help with managing my time so that I can get more done. I need help with Swift so that I can build my app. I need help with sleeping better so that I can feel more alive. Whatever it is, it can be anything. It can be a foreign language, it can be anything. I need help with blank so that I can blank. Something that you're grappling with right now, something that you might be having a hard time with right now. I want you to spend the next minute, don't overthink it, just something, and write it down. Here's what's going to happen next, all right? Pay attention. Here's what's going to happen next. I want you to take that card, and I want you to hand it to somebody in a different row right now. Take your card, hand it to somebody in a different row. It could be backwards, forwards, wherever. All right, just one hand off. Just one hand off. All right, guys. So here's what happens next. We're going to start this in 1 second, and I'm going to say to you, after I say start, what's going to happen is you're going to look at that card, and if you can help that person, if you can help or you know somebody who can help, maybe you have a good article, maybe you've been through this yourself, you're going to write down the first part of your email address on the back of that card. So sgupta@umish or whatever it is. Just write down sgupta, write down your version of that on the back of that card, and then hand it to somebody else. If you can't help, then hand it to somebody else, right? And we're going to keep switching these cards throughout the next 5 minutes, all right? You're going to keep handing them off, right? And you're probably going to stand up for this. You can stay in kind of your general area, but you're literally just going to be handing cards. You can help, write your name on the back, and if you can't, hand it to somebody else. All right, let's start. So they'll be in the lobby on the way out, right? Listen, I can guarantee you right now, if I look through those cards, every single one of them would be packed with names, right? And the backers that you have in this room are going to be some of the most important backers you have. But oftentimes what I've found is that people are kind of afraid to ask for when they need help, right? I just need help with this. And just having a sentence like this and being able to go to somebody and say, look, I need help with this, you'll be amazed how many people are willing to back you. Now, I want to close on one thought before we wrap it all up, and thank you again for your time, is that when I was starting my company, my first company, I had a few different ideas. And I was coming right out of, at that time, out of business school, out of Kellogg, and I sort of had these fancy graphs, and I was like, hey, the market size is like this, and it's like this. And I sat down with a mentor of mine and shared with her all this data about all these different sort of business lines I could create. And she looked at me and she said, hey, do any of these actually feel like something you want to go do? Do they feel like a business you actually want to go create? And that question actually took me back a little bit, because I think oftentimes in environments like this, in classrooms, sometimes we focus a lot on, hey, what does the market need, right? What's the market need right now? What kind of product can I create? What's going to service them? And we spend so much time thinking about our potential users and our potential customers. We sometimes don't spend enough time thinking about ourselves. And she shared a quote with me at that time, which was going back to Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King went to a mentor of his and was trying to figure out if he really wanted to go lead the Civil Rights March, if that was something he should really go do. And his mentor said to him, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive. And then go do that. Because what the world needs is more people who have come alive. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks a lot.
Students, thank you. I hope you understand the messages that were delivered today. One that rang loud and clear with me was being backable.